Good afternoon, staff and members of the public. I declare the ordinary council meeting of 25 August 2026 open at 5:30 p.m. The Shire of Carnarvon acknowledges and respects the Ingada and Bayungu people as traditional custodians of the lands where we live and work. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The Shire of Carnarvon is committed to honouring the traditional custodians' unique cultural and spiritual relationships to the land, waters and seas and their rich contribution to society. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded to facilitate community participation for minute-taking purposes and as required by the Act. Members of the public are reminded that in accordance with Meeting Procedures Local Law 2021, mobile phones and other electronic devices should be switched off and not used during the meeting. Attendance will be recorded in the minutes as per the requirements of the Act. There are no apologies and there are no approved leave of absence. Item 2, elected members and officers are reminded of the requirements of section 5.65 of the Local Government Act 1995 to disclose any interest during the meeting or where the matter is to be discussed. CEO, are there any declarations of interest?
Yes, I have 3 declarations of interest. 7.1.3 from myself, Amanda Dexter, for my leave item, and 7.1.3 from Amanda Layton to do with the annual leave of the CEO. And I have one from Stephanie Becker, 7.1.4, the Carnarvon Space and Technology Museum leave request. Sorry, mine and Amanda's are financial and Steph's is impartiality.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations? No. Item 3.1. Questions taken on notice from previous meeting, there were none. Item 3.2, public question time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Public question time is allocated a minimum period of 15 minutes in accordance with the Act. The Shire of Carnarvon Meeting Procedure Local Law 2021 allows each member of the public to ask up to 2 questions, but for other members of the public will be invited to ask their questions. If myself as the presiding member determine that questions are out of order due to the use of offensive or objectionable expressions or are defamatory, they will not be considered, recorded nor responded to. By way of update from our last meeting, the Shire has now developed a process by which notice of questions can be lodged directly from our website. Where a person is unable to attend the meeting to ask their question, the question will be dealt with as correspondence and answers published on our website for transparency and for the benefit of the broader community. To learn more about this development, I encourage you to visit the Shire's website and navigate to Council and then Council Meetings. I thank the officers for their work on establishing this new process, and I would welcome feedback from the community on how it might be enhanced over time. I declare public question time open at 5:32 p.m. CEO, have we received any questions prior to the meeting?
No questions received.
Are there any public questions? Please come forward and state your name and address before asking your first question.
Church, Memory Station. Afternoon all. The CEO has turned up for the 3rd time council meetings. Great to see you. In a row, 3 times in a row. CEO. 3 times in a row. You've been to a council meeting.
Mr. Gooch, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, sir. Might the Commissioner update the community on the current situation with regards to the Community Emergency Services Manager, CESM, role for the Carnarvon-Gascoyne region, given that this position has been vacated since 2nd of September 2025, and noting the Shire did not follow the 2024 cyclone policy for cyclones Mitchell and Narelle. No pastoral stations were contacted prior to these events. And also give the actual reasons why the previous MOU between the 3 shires has been dissolved, besides the Carnarvon Shire having a change of CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Gooch. I think there's a few questions in your question, but it's a great opportunity to address this issue. I became aware shortly after my arrival that the Community Emergency Services Manager position was vacant, and for the benefit of the public, it is a position that is established by memorandum of understanding between local government or governments and the Department of Fire and Emergency Services. The situation is that the shires of Shark Bay and Upper Gascoyne, who were part of that MOU, formally withdrew from that agreement. I advocated and the Shire advocated quite strongly to the Fire and Emergency Services Commissioner to retain the position. I thought that there was value in Carnarvon, particularly with respect to our exposure to natural hazards, to retain the memorandum of understanding as a standalone local government in the short term, but obviously being open to expand it in time. I received correspondence last week from the FES Commissioner declining that offer. So that position has now been formally withdrawn, and the Shire is in the process of, I guess, wrapping up the MOU in accordance with the termination provisions. To your second question about the cyclone policy and pastoral station contact, I'm probably going to be able to offer a less specific response. But suffice to say that under Western Australia's emergency management arrangements, the Department of Fire and Emergency Services is the hazard management agency for tropical cyclone and storm-related events. It isn't local government, so local government might play a role, particularly with respect to recovery and perhaps support of the HMA. We are not the hazard management agency for cyclone.
Can I ask another question, sir?
Sure.
What is the total financial cost to the Shire of Carnarvon per year to support the SESM? And what is the total financial cost per year of a Shire employed emergency services manager?
Good question. I think if we'd had a little bit of notice, we probably could have answered it for you today, but I'm going to have to take that question on notice to make sure that we get you a specific and accurate response. But it was, the MOU does establish the cost sharing arrangement between the local governments and DFES. DFES are the major funding partner, and the local government contribution is linked to the rateable assessments, or effectively the value of rates that each of the local governments are able to levy. And so smaller local governments pay less, larger local governments pay more. So that's a general answer to your question, but I'll take on notice the specific response that you seek.
And also, if you don't mind, I'll ask a third question.
Well, can I just get indication as to how many other questions we might have today? I'll allow a third question for each.
Thank you, Commissioner. Were all people present in person as listed in the last Shire Ordinary Council meeting, 28 July 2026?
Just give us a moment, Mr. Gooch. We might be able to answer your question without taking it on notice.
Yes, you can do it. Bring it up on the screen and then everyone can see it. So,
All these six, yeah.
Is any of these six think that they were there and they weren't there?
Cole, you do it, yeah. I think Cole might have.
Is it proved that he was here? Oh, was he online? I think Cole was online.
Problems at the time.
Yeah, reason for the,
You'll take on notice.
yeah, I think we need to take it on notice, but is there a specific reason you're looking for an answer?
Well, I just legally, if, I'm just asking if people were listed down there were in person. Or like most other meetings would happen if they're online or writing in the coffee table. They would, have it wherever they were streaming it from.
So a meeting is either considered to be electronic or not, and at the moment, officers attending aren't necessarily don't deem a meeting electronic. So we generally put where councillors come from. So had the commissioner not been present in the room but online, that would have been notified. It hasn't been at any time. Our policy or process in our standing orders to actually say whether our staff are in the room.
Look, I think we want to say confidently and accurately that all of those people were present, either in person or online, but we might take that question on notice just to confirm, and we'll check the record. Thanks, Mr. Gooch.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any further public questions? If not, I'll declare public question time closed at 5:41 p.m. Which now takes us to item 3.3, public deputations. There are no deputations requested at this meeting. Item 4 is the confirmation and receiving of the minutes, and I move that the council confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 28 July 2026 as a true and accurate record, and declare that resolved by simple majority. Item 5 is announcements by the presiding member without discussion. Welcome to the August Ordinary Council meeting of the Shire of Carnarvon at a new starting time of 5:30 p.m, which is a trial that will occur for the September and October Ordinary Council meetings also. I'd like to remind the public gallery that immediately following tonight's meeting, refreshments will be served at the RSL across the road, where we invite you to join council and staff so we can engage further with you. Last month, I advised that it was likely that the 2026-27 municipal budget would be adopted at this meeting. However, that has not been possible. Ministerial approval to levy differential rates was only received at approximately 3 p.m. last Friday after agenda cut-off. Rather than presenting the budget as a late item and not allowing the community and council more time to consider it, I intend to call a special council meeting for 9 a.m. on Friday of this week to consider the budget adoption. Notice of this meeting and agenda papers will be available on the Shire's website shortly. Over the last month, Carnarvon has played host to some major events, including the Gascoyne Dash, with local rider Declan Gibbings being crowned King of the River. Whilst on motorsport, I'd also like to recognise Damien Layton, a 16-year-old Carnarvon local who has been selected to join the WA team and represent our state at the MXGP World FIM Championships in Darwin next month, and wish him the best of luck. I also had the pleasure of attending the Gascoyne Food Festival, including the opening taste of the Gascoyne event. Despite some nervous weather watching in the days leading up, the night was absolutely superb and demonstrated the rich cultural diversity expressed through dance, food, music and friendship across our community. This was followed by the Plantation Feast, which was this year hosted by Calypso Plantation and Eddie and Sue Smith. It was my first time attending this event, which was so very special. A celebration of food, farmers and new friends, as more than 200 feasted from a long table set right in the middle of a working plantation. These local events help put our town and region firmly on the map, and I want to recognise the hard work of so many volunteers and sponsors who support them. Earlier this month, the Shire hosted a well-attended business after hours community event at the Art Gallery. I really want to thank those who joined us on the night, and your feedback is always valuable. I'm never afraid to know what you think and how we as a Shire can serve you better. I used this event and other opportunities over the last month to reinforce the importance of the upcoming election campaign, with the electoral roll closing on 7 October and nominations closing on 20 October. I encourage you to check your enrolment at the earliest opportunity by contacting the WA Electoral Commission or the Shire offices. You'll see our local campaign, Your Shire, Your Voice, rolling out over the coming weeks and months. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind the community of upcoming CharMap public consultation opportunities in Coral Bay tomorrow and Carnarvon on Thursday. More information is available on the Shire's website. This is your chance to understand and influence the Shire's adaptation strategy to the likely coastal risks in both Coral Bay and Carnarvon. Sadly, the Carnarvon community has recently mourned the passing of long-standing resident Bill Lyle. Bill had deep connections to Carnarvon's horticultural industry and was a long-time member of St George's Anglican Church. After initially working in banking, Bill returned to his family's plantation on North River Road. The Shire of Carnarvon extends our condolences to Bill's family and friends. Vale Bill Lyle. Since the last Ordinary Council meeting, my official engagements have included attended the Major Projects and Infrastructure Committee, meeting with DTMI at the One Mile Jetty to discuss project progress, meeting with DWER to discuss water licensing. I attended the Carnarvon Career Expo, meeting with NDIA to discuss their upcoming NDIS Access Clinic, regular meeting with WA Police Force Carnarvon OIC, meeting with the Minister for Local Government to report the Shire's progress and readiness for elections, meeting with DPLH to discuss blowholes management and 1 Mile Jetty reserves, meeting with LGIS to discuss the Shire's insurance cover, meeting with WALGA to discuss election support. I chaired the Local Emergency Management Committee, hosted the Shire of Carnarvon Business After Hours. I attended the Awards Committee. I met with the Carnarvon Growers Association, meeting with local disability advocates and health professionals, attended a meeting of the WALGA Gascoyne Country Zone. I attended the Gascoyne Food Festival events. I had further meetings with Minister Beasley in her capacity as the Minister for Gascoyne and a memorable boat tour of the Facine, facilitated by the Gascoyne Development Commission, and attended a meeting of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. In addition to these, there were numerous internal meetings and briefings, as well as engagements with local ratepayers and community members. Item 6. Is presentations, petitions and memorials. 6.1, petition proposed 2026-27 differential rates. This item presents to Council a petition from Mr Shane Aylmore on behalf of 94 petitioners in relation to the 2026-27 budget and proposed rate increase. The Shire of Carnarvon Meeting Procedures Local Law 2021 establishes the ability and the procedure by which a petition can be presented to Council. Clause 6.10 of the local law provides that a petition can be made by electors of the district and must contain the name, address and signature of the elector. The local law requires the petition to be considered by Council prior to the consideration by Council of a matter which is the subject of the petition. Given the 2026-27 budget will not be considered by Council this evening, the petition is therefore presented in accordance with the local law. The report notes that 85 of the petitioners are located in Coral Bay, with 9 located in Carnarvon. Officers were only able to verify that 7 petitioners met the requirements of the local law. 2 petitioners did not sign the petition, and 85 petitioners were unable to be verified with the information available to the officer. The officer has established in detail the limitations in being able to verify the petitioners against the requirements of the local law. Notwithstanding this, Council takes quite seriously the subject matter of the petition and the concerns expressed within it. The preparation and advancement of the 2026-27 budget has been my highest priority and has consumed much of my focus since my appointment. My term as Commissioner commenced on 27 May 2026, and I was required to make my first budget-related decision at Council on 30 June 2026. Ordinarily, normal budget processes would be in train for months, allowing more time to consider and develop a budget prior to presentation to Council. As the Shire of Carnarvon has a differential rating structure, additional administrative requirements place more pressure on timelines, as the rating proposal is required to be advertised for public submissions prior to seeking ministerial approval. I do not disagree with the primary sentiments of the petition, which are: one, ratepayers are increasingly under financial pressure, and two, council should seek budget savings and efficiency measures. Unfortunately, the same financial pressures that are being exerted on household budgets are also being felt by the Shire of Carnarvon. Costs are increasing across the board, most of which are outside of our control. As time has passed and I've become more familiar with the Shire, its operations and its near-term priorities, my view has only strengthened that a rate increase any lower than what has been proposed would be irresponsible. In fact, the more that I understand issues more fully, the more convinced that I am that the need to overhaul our rating strategy is desperately in need, and that a new council with a fresh community strategic plan must make some hard decisions about the Shire's financial future. There is an officer's recommendation commencing on page 13 of the agenda, which I move and declare resolved by simple majority. Item 7.1.1, the minutes of the Awards Committee 12 August 2026. The Awards Committee of Council met on 12 August, and as the minutes reflect, the primary matter of discussion was to consider and recommend to Council recipients of the Carnarvon and Coral Bay National Volunteer Week Awards. Whilst much of the committee meeting was held in closed session in accordance with the Act, I'm constrained in how much I can say in relation to this report. Can I thank those that have nominated community members and groups for an award this year? As someone who doesn't call your community home, the calibre and commitment of nominations is further confirmation of the value that volunteering has on our social, environmental and community fabric of regional communities like yours. The award recipients will be announced at an event on Saturday, 5 December 2026, which also coincides with International Volunteer Day. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 21 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. Item 7.1.2, the minutes of the Major Projects and Infrastructure Committee. I attended my first meeting of the Major Projects and Infrastructure Committee in July, which was an opportunity to meet the Shire's project management team and be briefed on the progress of its major projects. The committee received information relating to key risks associated with each project and mitigation measures being applied to each project. The Shire has a pipeline of major projects, largely funded and supported by external funding. As major projects such as the Tramway Bridge Stage 1 and Van Dongen Park advance, others such as the Carnarvon and Coral Bay Airport upgrades, Seawater Inundation Project, and the Coral Bay Waste Facility and French Street are in various stages of design and procurement. I encourage the community and potential candidates to familiarise themselves with the committee's minutes and the major projects dashboard, which presents concise and factual information on project progress. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 32 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. Item 7.1.3, and there are two financial declarations of interest. Who will now leave the room? So just a reminder that Amanda Dexter and Mrs. Amanda Layton have both declared financial interests in this item, 7.1.3 CEO leave, and both interests are financial and have left the room. This item requests Council's approval authorising annual leave in relation to the Chief Executive Officer and the appointment of an acting Chief Executive Officer. The Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee considered the relevant policy being EME 005 CEO leave, appointment of acting or temporary CEO at its meeting earlier today. Council will in due course receive the committee's recommendation, which will likely avoid Council having to authorise leave in these circumstances in the future. The CEO is seeking leave for a period of 19 working days from 9 October to 4 November inclusive. The current policy allows for the CEO to appoint an acting CEO for a period of up to 8 weeks, subject to the leave being approved by the Shire President. The policy was last reviewed in 2024, and the management structure embedded in the policy no longer reflects the organisation, and in some respects makes the policy inoperable, requiring council resolution. In relation to the leave, I've given consideration to the leave entitlement of the CEO, council's contractual obligations with the CEO, and also the period of time in question. I am mindful that the period of leave will coincide with the formal commencement of the election, with the candidate nomination processing occurring within the leave period, as well as the commencement of the official caretaker period of council. The demand on organisational resources might increase during this period, supporting the WAEC in the conduct of the election, but also resolving any urgent business before we enter the caretaker period on 20 October. This could involve special council meetings held at short notice to ensure that the operations of the Shire can continue to meet the expectations of the community for the remainder of the calendar year. I'm also mindful that the CEO has an entitlement to take leave, and at the conclusion of the election process, the organisation will similarly see an increase in resource intensity as it onboards, supports and establishes a new working relationship with the council. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 49. However, I am going to move an alternative. That council, by simple majority 1, approves the Chief Executive Officer taking annual leave from Friday 9 October 2026 to Wednesday 4 November 2026 inclusive. 2, appoints Mrs. Amanda Layton, Executive Manager, Corporate Strategy and Performance as Acting Chief Executive Officer from Friday 9 October 2026 to Wednesday 4 November 2026 inclusive. 3, authorises Mrs. Layton during the period of appointment to perform the functions and duties and exercise the powers and delegations applying to the Office of Chief Executive Officer. And 4, approves Mrs. Layton receiving remuneration equivalent to the base salary applicable to the Office of the Chief Executive Officer, calculated on a pro rata basis for the period of the acting appointment. The reason for the alternative motion is that in the fourth part of the motion, it clarifies the remuneration arrangements to reflect the historical practices of the Shire. I move that motion and declare it resolved by simple majority. For the benefit of the officers outside of the room that have declared interest, council has resolved an alternative motion to the officer's recommendation, which effectively clarifies in part 4 of the motion the remuneration entitlements of the acting chief executive officer. Item 7.1.4 is the Carnarvon Space and Technology Museum lease request, and I have a declaration of interest from Ms. Lecker, which is an impartiality interest as she is the chairperson of the Carnarvon Space and Technology Museum. This report seeks council approval to enter into a lease with Carnarvon Space and Technology Museum Incorporated, CSTM, for a period of 10 years with a 10-year option. The current 10-year lease expired on 3 April 2026 and is currently subject to a holding over arrangement subject to council consideration of this report. CSTM has requested that the Shire, as part of the lease renewal, assume responsibility for building insurance, which the report estimates will cost in the order of $2,100 per annum. This is supported as it ensures that Shire buildings are adequately insured by the Shire and provides some financial relief to this not-for-profit organisation. Unfortunately, a request to support the ceiling of the overflow car park cannot be supported at this time owing to higher budget priorities. However, this is a matter that can be considered in future budget cycles by council. Since 2016, CSTM has invested more than $750,000 into its buildings and exhibits, which should be applauded and recognised. It contributes positively to our region's tourism value whilst also minimising financial impacts on ratepayers. It has been many years since I visited the museum. However, I look forward to visiting this coming school holidays with my family. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 56 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. 7.2.1 Airport Compound Property Arrangements. This report seeks approval for a number of things, primarily to enter into a lease with the Carnarvon Riders Association, CRA, and an MOU with the Carnarvon State Emergency Service. The airport compound historically accommodated both the CRA and the SES. However, this report advises that the CRA lease will now apply to the entirety of the compound, with the SES storage being relocated to a shed close by. The officer's report is very detailed and recommends an initial lease term of 10 years to CRA with 2 5-year options. The MOU with the SES does not provide long-term tenure, recognising that the shed and nearby dwellings might be subject to future council decisions and budget funding in relation to their removal or redevelopment. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 111 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. Item 7.2.2, Rates Exemption, Gascoyne Memorial Fund. This report presents to Council an application for rates exemption pursuant to section 6.26 of the Act and Council Policy CF019. The application relates to 2 rate assessments, and if approved, will present a reduction in rates in the order of $78,482 per annum. This is a material amount to the applicant, a not-for-profit incorporated entity, which provides affordable housing, affordable accommodation to financially vulnerable residents, including veterans. However, it is also material to council, as it amounts to approximately 1% of our rates. The officer's report sets out the applicant's eligibility in accordance with the Act, our policy, and with relevant decisions of the State Administrative Tribunal. The recommendation seeks endorsement of that position with retrospective effect from 1 July 2025. I understand that the rates relating to these assessments were not levied in the previous financial year and therefore will not have an impact on our financial year closing position or our proposed budget. When council next reviews delegations, I wonder whether it should consider the accepted practice across the sector, and specifically if it is appropriate that the CEO have delegated authority with respect to applications of this type, where there is sufficient evidence provided that substantiates an exemption eligibility in accordance with the Act. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 133 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. Item 7.2.3, Rates Exemption MRAC. This report similarly seeks council's endorsement of a rates exemption in relation to the Murchison Aboriginal Corporation with respect to 17 properties across Carnarvon. MRAC and the relevant properties provide affordable housing for disadvantaged or vulnerable Aboriginal families. Officers have considered the application against statutory provisions and case law and have determined their eligibility and recommended same to council. Unlike the previous item, the applicant was granted a partial exemption of 80%, which dates back to 2016. This will therefore reduce the financial impact on the Shire to an amount just short of $7,000. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 146 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. Item 7.2.4, STC Narelle Recovery and Resilience Fund. This report advises council that it has been successful in its request for $350,000 in grant funding to support recovery associated with the impacts of Tropical Cyclone Narelle. This forms part of a $1.5 million contribution from Rio Tinto, administered by DFES, to support cyclone-impacted communities with recovery and resilience projects. I draw attention to the report on page 157, which states, and I quote, "Collectively, the 3 projects provide a coordinated approach to the next stage of recovery. The Community Recovery Officer project provides a dedicated capacity to maintain recovery outreach, coordination and support as immediate recovery programs transition towards longer-term resilience and preparedness. Future Ready Industries provides the resources to translate that engagement into practical preparedness business continuity, digital inclusion, and industry resilience activities. The Carnarvon Floodplain Recovery Responsibility and Resilience Project addresses a separate but complementary priority by consolidating previous floodplain work, clarifying responsibilities, and identifying practical actions and future priorities arising from STC Narelle, end quote. The report seeks approval to accept the funding, execute funding agreements, and to authorise expenditure in relation to the projects. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 157 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. Item 7.2.5, accounts paid under delegation July 2026. This report presents to Council the listing of accounts paid under delegation for July. I asked a number of questions in relation to accounts at the agenda briefing, which have been resolved to my satisfaction. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 176 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. Item 7.2.6, Blowholes Eco-Friendly Campground 2025-26 Operational Review. This report presents to Council an operational review of the first full year of the transition of the Blowholes from informal camping to a managed campground model, following the adoption by Council of a business case in April 2025. The review presents detailed data on visitation, costs, and makes suggestions on future enhancement of the model. It should be noted the net cost to ratepayers is in excess of $400,000 per annum. Some of these costs relate to establishment and may not be incurred in year 2, and some costs will have been incurred by the Shire ordinarily. The review makes plain that the campground was not intended to cover the financial costs of managing the whole reserve, but to improve the visitor experience and to better manage waste and environmental impacts. It is notable that almost half of the expenditure relates to the provision of water on the reserve. I have, along with the CEO, recently met with the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage in relation to the reserve, and just yesterday visited the reserve for myself. I expect that DPLH will request that the Shire review and update the reserve's management plan shortly, which is now more than a decade old, with some of the studies underpinning the plan even older. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 191 of the agenda, which I move and declare resolved by simple majority. Item 7.2.7, 2026-27 Christmas New Year closure arrangements. The Shire of Carnarvon has an extremely brief but prescriptive policy in relation to the closure of facilities and services during the Christmas and New Year period. This report seeks Council's endorsement to deviate from the policy position consistent with the approach in the previous 2 years. The report advises that for ordinary hour staff, this equates to 7 working days of leave that will be required to be taken. I'm advised that management will work with staff to ensure that sufficient leave is available to them, including accessing time in lieu, leave without pay, or approval to accrue a leave deficit in some instances. Before moving the recommendation, I seek confirmation from the Chief Executive Officer that this arrangement, notwithstanding its historical precedents, complies with industrial awards and agreements that apply to the Shire's employees. Thank you. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 219 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by simple majority. Item 7.4.1, the Regional Precincts and Partnership Program change to funding for the Faseen to Harbour Walk project. This report seeks Council's approval to redirect funding to enhance the Van Dongen Park development and cease progressing the Faseen to Harbour Walk project, linking the Faseen foreshore with the small boat harbour. The Faseen to Harbour Walk project will be substantially impacted by the DRF seawater inundation project, resulting in the Shire being unable to meet our grant timelines under the Regional Precincts and Partnerships program. I'm advised the possibility for a funding extension for this project has been considered and ruled out. $600,000 was notionally allocated to this project, with $110,000 spent to date on detailed design, technical investigations and other project costs. It is proposed to redirect the remaining $490,000 to support Van Dongen Stage 2, which will allow the Shire to deliver public toilet facilities and enhance parking arrangements. Both parking and public toilet facilities have been raised with me by community members and disability advocates during my short tenure. I want to emphasise that this is to increase the scope of the existing project, not to address any funding shortfall or cost overrun. While some community members may be disappointed that the Facinta Harbour Walk will not proceed at this time, I'm confident that a significant portion of this project could be accommodated within the detailed design of the Seawater Inundation Project, as West Street and Baxter Park is a high priority focus and weakness in our inundation protection system. There is an officer's recommendation found on page 230 of the agenda, which I move and resolve by absolute majority. That now takes us to item 7.4.2, the Regional Airports Development Scheme 2027-29, Carnarvon Airport Northern Apron Rehabilitation. This report substantially seeks council approval to apply for $800,000 in grant funding under the Regional Airport Development Scheme for the Carnarvon Airport Northern Apron Rehabilitation and Strengthening Project. The regulatory and financial costs of operating a significant regional airport are high, and this project is in addition to a $17 million project that the Shire is continuing to seek funding for. The Shire seeks more than 20% of the funding pool available statewide, which is ambitious, and if approved, will require an additional $800,000 in own source funding. There might be other funding opportunities to supplement this project. However, if the co-contribution falls to the Shire alone, this would equate to a 10% rate increase alone. As an operator of a CASA regulated airport, we cannot deny recent technical studies which show the apron in extremely poor condition and the classification of action required. Before I consider the officer's recommendation, I do want to seek some clarification from officers with respect to a report the council received in December of 2023, which indicates that at that time we were in receipt of nearly $390,000 in RADS funding for Northern Apron reconstruction, with the project to be completed by May of 2025. Could I understand perhaps what happened to that money and why the project didn't proceed at that time?
Yeah, Commissioner. It's my understanding, and I'll go back and look under the current administration. I believe that funding was subsequently transferred or moved into the total pool that is being looked at for the current Carnarvon Airport upgrade project, and was moved away from the northern and southern aprons. Both the northern and southern aprons, which were previously applied for, are not the highest priority compared to the runway central apron and both taxiways that are being looked at in the current upgrade program. Which is why that was moved from that particular piece of work.
There is a officer's recommendation found on page 235 of the agenda, which I move and declare resolved by simple majority. Item 8, applications for leave. There are none. Item 9, motions of which previous notice have been given. There are none. Item 10, questions from members without notice. There are none. Item 11, urgent business approved by the presiding member or by decision of council. There are none. Item 12, matters for which meeting to be closed to members of the public. And I move that pursuant to section 5.234C of the Local Government Act 1985, that the meeting be closed to the public for the purposes of considering item 12.1 and declare that resolved by simple majority. And I do just remind the public gallery before they leave that we will reopen and let you know what decision we've made, but then I do encourage you to stick around for a drink after.
First, we'll come back in.
Hi, you see me coming?
Welcome back. I'm required by the regulations to report the decisions of council behind closed doors. Council resolved, 1, to award request for tender RFT 02/2026 Speedway Road Realignment Project Avon Valley Plant Equipment Proprietary Limited Stera to the value of $1,297,405.25 exclusive of GST, subject to A, confirmation of the additional roads to recovery funding, and B, council adopting the 2026-27 annual budget. 2, in accordance with the Local Government Act 1995, Section 949, capital A, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to make any necessary non-material amendments and finalise the execution of a contract between the Shire of Carnarvon and Avon Valley Plant Equipment Proprietary Limited Stera. And 3, note that project updates will be provided to the Major Projects Committee of Council for monitoring throughout the construction phase of the project. Item 13, date of next meeting. The next scheduled ordinary meeting of council is Tuesday, 22 September, commencing at 5:30 p.m. But just a reminder, we do have a special council meeting this Friday at 9 a.m. To consider the adoption of the 2026-27 municipal budget. Item 14, closure. I thank the staff and members of the public for their attendance and declare the meeting closed at 6:17 p.m.
Thank you, everybody.